Jeremy Lin, it is so great to see you. And you are zooming in from Shanghai, China. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm here in Shanghai. I'm finishing up my quarantine. And so after I get out, I'll be able to start getting ready for the CBA season.
That is amazing. So you're in quarantine, of course, because you had to come over from the US. When does the season in your training camp start?
It was a crazy story. I came over actually in end of July. I ended up getting COVID, went through a whole process. So I was in the hospital for
Oh,
quite some time. And so now I'm finishing up this quarantine. The season actually already started, and so it started. We're 2 games in, and then but I still have to finish up the quarantine, get my physical done, go to Beijing, do some paperwork, and then ramp up because during quarantine I wasn't able to have any access to the court or weight room. So it's been quite a journey.
whew. I didn't
Yeah,
know you had COVID, but how are you feeling now?
I'm feeling good. I was vaccinated, so I actually didn't really have my symptoms were very, very low level.
Mm.
Like at the most, I had like a fever for a couple hours, but other than that, it was really low level symptoms.
Jeremy, we have so much to talk about because you have so much going on besides playing basketball in China and everything that you're going through. But since you brought it up, the COVID and being vaccinated, what are the rules so far in China, especially in the CBA, as far as vaccinated players and all that stuff? I'm just kind of curious.
So there's no vaccination mandate, but they definitely have a lot of regulations on getting cleared. And once you get cleared, you get sent into. Our season is broken up into 3 phases. The first 2 phases are both bubbles. And so right now, even for me to get into this bubble, which it's already started, the games have already started. I have to go through this whole process. Which once I clear this, once I clear the travel restrictions, then I have to do additional CBA bubble, regulation stuff to get in. And so that's how they're making sure that all the athletes are safe. And then towards, in 2022, we're going to go to home and away. But COVID, has been, a lot of people here, there are very few infections, and most of them are from people flying in. So really, it's not too much going on in terms of new infections on the ground in the cities. Most of them are coming from the airports.
What do you make of what's kind of going on right now in the NBA, where there's not a mandate for players, but in cities like New York, and we're dealing with this with the Brooklyn Nets and Kyrie Irving. If you're not vaccinated, you can't practice at home, you can't play at home. What are you making of this as you watch from the other side of the world?
It's it's that's such a great question, and it's just so hard because you can make arguments different ways, and but at the end of the day, it kind of goes back to it's this tension that is between, like, do we feel like we want to do everything we can to everybody as give everybody the best chance to be as healthy as you can be, but if you do that, you're going to impose on certain, human freedom, human rights, civil rights, those types of things. And so it's this like interesting tension that I'm seeing, and I've been experiencing, in being in the CBA, being in the G League last year, and just how the different ways of handling it are. I think at the end of the day, where I stand is, for sure, to me, like the vaccine helps. I think that's like a fact, that's scientific. Like when I got COVID, I went into the hospital. Every single doctor that came through, the first question was like, "Are you vaccinated?" And then I asked them, a bunch of questions, and they talked about the difference between vaccinated and unvaccinated patients. And I mean, this is a whole, hospital wing full with hundreds of people with COVID. And so they see this every single day. And their first question is always, "Are you vaccinated?" At the same time, I also understand and completely understand when somebody says, like, "I don't want to just put something into my body. This should be my own decision, and I want to be able to make that for myself." Totally understand that and respect that as well. And so at the end, like, you're seeing you have the NBA, you have the states, you have the union, you have all these different competing, voices. Who wins out?
and it's interesting because we've always known Kyrie Irving as someone to be an advocate, someone to speak out, and he says he's trying to be the voice for the voiceless in this situation for so many people that lost their jobs because of vaccine mandates. So I'm going to kind of shift that though and use, how Kyrie's using his voice with vaccine and how you have been using your voice, and you always have spoken out on different topics, whether it was racism in the Asian American community, mental health, and now you're using your voice and your platform in basketball for UNICEF. So this is big news. Jeremy, tell me what your role is now as the ambassador for UNICEF.
Yeah, for me and UNICEF, what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring the awareness level, and we're basically trying to really prioritize mental health for youth, and especially even within the sports setting, but just having the next generation and the youth be able to talk about and have access and resources to mental health in new and different ways. I think that's super important, knowing that for me, growing up with immigrant parents and not fully understanding, those, everything with having stigmas around it, and then going through my experience of kind of always feeling like I never belonged and being bullied for my skin and, my skin color and different things like that. Like, there were a lot of factors that played into it. And now as I'm getting older, and I'm going to therapy and seeing a sports psychologist, I'm starting to unwind a lot of things that have happened. And I wish that I started earlier. I wish that other people have access or have that opportunity to be able to figure that out at a young age. And so that's what UNICEF has been pushing. And honestly, I'm just so honored, because I'm like, they're doing something amazing. And this isn't the only thing that we've done with UNICEF. We've done some stuff with vaccines as well, but UNICEF has always been, very much listening to the people on the ground and seeing like, what do we need? And COVID and the pandemic, we're seeing like mental health it was already a big issue, but now it's like really rising really quickly.
I remember as a kid using my little UNICEF box to try to raise funds when I would go trick-or-treating. So now today, how can people either support this cause or take advantage and learn about all these platforms that you're speaking on, whether it's the racism, like you said, and specifically the mental health in youth? So how can people learn more and take advantage of this via UNICEF?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you can go to the UNICEF website. There's definitely a bunch of, and that's the thing, when people ask me like, how do I help? There's so many different ways. I never and just be like, donate money. That's the only way. Of course, that's very helpful and that's completely necessary. So by all means, if you have the conviction and the means to do that, that'd be great. But even just learning about it, reading about it, expanding your perspective, having a conversation with somebody, or passing it on to somebody else, or posting about it on your social media. Like, there's so many different avenues to being able to support. And I think it always has to start with a personal conviction. And I think that's, something that's really, really important in terms of like, I need to understand it before I go and talk about it. So even if it was just self-exploration and self-learning. And if anybody has any questions, unicefusa.org. That's where you can go.
Jeremy, you mentioned how you just went through a lot of struggles, and a lot of it you kept private, and now you're able to unwind through therapy and through recognizing mental health. I want to go back to when you and I first got to know each other, and it was during the craziest time of your life, which was Linsanity with the New York Knicks. When you look at that time, and you were very young in your career, who is Jeremy Lin now compared to what you were then? How have you grown and changed?
I mean, it's two different people. Back then, I was a wide-eyed. I mean, it was naive. It was innocent, but it was naive. It was like when the racism was coming, the microaggressions were coming, all these different things. For me, I always grew up just being like, that's just how it is for an Asian. Like, it is what it is, and like, we just had to be better. We just had to work harder. And I just put it on my shoulders, and I keep putting it on my shoulders. And now, as I progress, I've realized actually, like, this isn't so much about my story. When I was young, all I could really understand was my story. And my story had my obstacles, and racism was part of it. And I was like, I'm hell-bent on finding a way to overcome it. And that's what I would do. Now I'm starting to realize it's not about my story and my career. Like, it's about the next generation, my future kids, my kids' kids, like everybody else. Do we want them experiencing and fighting these same things? And it's not just racism. It's everything from, like you said, mental health or social justice or whatever it is, like there's so many injustices happening that are being exacerbated right now through the pandemic and through what's going on in the, you know, in the political climate of the world. And so again, I think now it's about leaving a legacy for the next generation, knowing that my immigrant parents did everything they could to give us the best chance. You know, my father grew up with marbles on a farm where like that's all he had was, it was either marbles, pick up cow poo, or go study. Like that was his only options. And then he sacrificed a lot and my mom sacrificed a lot and gave, you know, allowed me to be here. And now it's like, what can I do to be thinking about the next generation? And that's why I went into different things like speaking out on racism, so, and this partnership with UNICEF and mental health. These are all things that are pretty passionate to me. You know, I'm pretty passionate about.
And it's incredible because during that time, and we just saw, you know, the Sports Illustrated covers, the national TV, the winning, the craziness over those 2 weeks. When you look back, though, from a new perspective, can you appreciate some elements from that time, though? Is there anything that stands out, a favorite moment that gave you this even bigger platform to speak on? Do you think, you know, I was blessed to have that moment or something?
I mean, it's exactly what you said. You know, said it perfectly. Appreciation, gratitude. Like to me, when I like during the first like 3 years, 4 years after Linsanity, like I never wanted to talk about it. I didn't want anything to do with it. It was scary. You know, people around me were changing. I didn't know how to navigate it. Like it was a lot. There's a lot of good that came with it, but it was a very scary time of my life. And it wasn't until later that I started to look back and actually think fondly of it and like appreciate and be grateful for it. And I was like, man, that was crazy. That was crazy, like in a good way. And it wasn't, you know, and so I think that was the evolution of me separating myself from like, again, this phenomenon that it is ghost that I felt like I had to always be for everybody else, to being like, man, that was a historic time. Like God really blessed me and gave me a miracle that is going to like be in the history books that like really people to this day are still looking back on that being like, I still vividly remember that that really impacted me in this way. And I think that doesn't happen to everybody. And the fact that I got a chance to experience that is just a blessing, right? It's a blessing from God that I got to do that and be a part of that story. And so I look back and I just smile and I'm like, wow, what a time, what a time, what an experience.
And you know what, Jeremy? It's being brought up a lot again, because of course the NBA is in its 75th anniversary and the Knicks were one of the original teams. So they're celebrating 75 years. And over the last 5 days, I've been seeing a lot of Jeremy Lin highlights and some good basketball and incredible moves. What do you think about that? I mean, your videos being played at the Garden, again, the highlights mixed in between Willis Reed and mixed in between, you know, Earl the Pearl. What do you think about kind of the great moments being mixed within those moments as well? Right now that we're kind of reliving it a little bit with the history.
I mean, that's the thing that I never, you know, and I think it's hard for me as a competitor. I'm still playing the game of basketball. I haven't retired. And so, you know, for me as a basketball player, I'm always thinking about, okay, what do I want to do next? What's this upcoming season hold for me? And there's always this like forward mentality. But like 2 years ago, when New York was hit really hard with COVID, when it first hit New York really badly, the Knicks and the city of New York were like, we need to uplift the spirits of the people. And they chose to re-air, they had Linsanity Week. And now you're seeing them you know, they're airing clips mixed in with names that I never thought and partially still don't think I should even be in the conversation with, you know, like, I mean, it's like I played for the Knicks for a very short amount of time. I'm not like, you know, I'm not I'm not completely objective about it, but I can understand like, to even be in that conversation, like, I don't know if I belong there at all, but that's the impact that it had. And it's not my job to be the judge of that. And so the fact that I'm in there, I'm just like, again, gratitude. It's like, it still shocks me. It still shocks me that like people are still talking about it. And I am learning every day, every year, just what kind of impact I really had. Because, you know, I thought after a year or two, it would just fade away.
That's New York for you and the New York fans. And then you went on to win an NBA championship at Toronto. And by the way, I have your bobblehead right behind me from the Brooklyn Nets. So there it is, right there.
I appreciate you highlighting that right there.
Right there. Jeremy Lin's always in my Zoom shot. Jeremy, it is so great to talk to you again and just to see what you're doing, using your voice, helping UNICEF, using UNICEF to help others. I really commend you. And it's just great to see you and great. Oh, good luck this season in the CBA and in Shanghai.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Good to hear from you. Good to see you again, Tina. And congrats on everything you're doing as well with Fox.
Oh, thank you so much.